Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I am your host, Daniel Coolbaugh. Today, I have with me a very special guest, Chloe. Chloe, how are you doing today?
I am doing very good. And yourself?
Oh, excellent, excellent. Just hanging out, talking about writing. It's always fun to do. So, and just for those of us that are tuning in for both YouTube, Spotify, and the RSS feed, Chloe, I met on Twitter just a little while back. I saw her book, The Girl of Ash and Snow, and I was like, who is this CM Quinn person? So I clicked on Chloe's Twitter and immediately took me to this amazing book. So Chloe, real quick, do you want to just let our audience know what your first book is about here?
So my first book, The Girl of Ash and Snow, follows a daring kind of rescue across this empire that's kind of on the cusp of rebellion. Book sort of starts off with this attack, and our main character's village is taken, and she's thrust into this unknown world, and she's, strikes up an unlikely alliance with a sort of a particular character, and they journey off, and they enter into this land, and they're both this fish out of water. Like, neither of them have any knowledge of this world, so you kind of join them on this journey, and pretty much their reluctance to get involved in this rebellion. They're like, no, we really want to, like, her focus is to rescue her people, and she doesn't want to get involved in all this political bullshit and all this stuff going on. But sort of through necessity, she kind of finds herself involved in things pretty much beyond her control. But yeah, I am terrible at describing my book, and I swear to God, at some point.
I mean, I've only seen the overview and a couple of the things like that on the different places where you posted it. But I mean, it seems like a really good description of the book, and it definitely sounds interesting to me. Like I said before we started recording, as soon as I saw the cover, I was like, oh, I'm in, and I went and looked at the blurb and everything. But I have to say, this overview on Barnes and Noble is just like terrific. So it looks really, really good. Really jealous. But yeah, you guys will have to check it out. I will be posting the link, obviously, as we always do, for Chloe's book here in the description for YouTube, Spotify, and the RSS.com. I think you guys will be really surprised and just have to snatch the book up right away as soon as you get to it and read that overview. Oh, man, you guys. Oh, you know what? Sorry, it wasn't allowing me to share for those of you. I just got to share it again. I don't know. Are you able to see it this time, Chloe, or no?
Yes, I can see it now.
Perfect. Oh, my goodness. Look at that. Yeah, and I have to say, I haven't seen too many overviews like this, and I really like it. Not online, at least. I've seen a lot of them like this on the back of books and things like that. Quite a few, actually, for Forgotten Realms, and a lot of them, really, I'd say from like the late 2000s. And I really wish people, would really divide their overview like this, into place and characters and things like that. I just think that, for me, I'm just like, really busy and stuff. So I just want to go right into really like what the book's about. And I feel like some people, they put that huge Amazon blurb on there. Whereas I think an overview like this, it just looks clean cut. I'm a really organized person. So to me, this just looks really good. So I really like how it looks on here.
Well, it kind of came out more of necessity because of sort of the nature of the story and the scope, with the fact that, so in the book, I should know. It's like about 4 different point of views. So this isn't a single point of view book. You've got different voices. So because there was a few different storylines going on, and I really wanted to write a blurb that kind of captured that, and trying to condense a blurb where it was just kind of focusing on one person's story. I want a reader to go into this book with the understanding that it's, it's not just Ren's story, it's Lorca's story, it's Sorcia's story as well. And it's all these different worlds colliding in this really desperate struggle for hope, for a future, and kind of trying to flip a few tropes of, rebellions, and the idea that the people leading these rebellions are so heroic and noble. But I kind of wanted to pose that question with this story is, potentially what if the person leading this rebellion is not that heroic figure? They could potentially be a lot worse. So that was the really fun thing about this story, and why I structured the blurb in the way that I did.
It's so funny that you say that, because I was just listening to this podcast that was talking about Joan of Arc and how basically like she would have taken over all of Europe. And some people wonder, like what her story would have been like. So to me, that's kind of interesting that you say that about your book. So I had seen that somewhere. I don't know if you had mentioned it or if I looked at the blurb or somewhere where you were discussing it. So to me, I think it was on Twitter. It just seemed really interesting. It was like right after I listened to that podcast about Joan of Arc, and listened to a couple other podcasts too about different. I was kind of on like a rebellion, like podcast, like rabbit hole, I guess. And I was listening to all these different people. So it was just funny how I think it was literally like later that day or the next day that your book kind of came into my view. So I just thought that was kind of really interesting. It was kind of serendipity, if you will. So I'm really looking forward to this one. So my wife, she's like, "Have you gotten it yet?" I was like, "I'm just gonna get on my phone and then go right to the get right into the Amazon Kindle when it gets here." So some of them, sorry to some other people, some of them you just can't wait for. So you just got to get them. So. There was somebody, I'm trying to remember, one of my friends just published his, and I like immediately went and grabbed it, and he's like, "Get your Kindle already?" And I was like, "No, I'm just gonna like sign in and read it." And he was like, "Okay." He goes, "I thought you were gonna wait." I was like, "Yeah, no, I couldn't wait." And I already started reading like the first couple chapters of it. So, all right. So if you don't mind, just starting with that first question I sent you there, Chloe. Sorry, I as soon as I saw that before we started recording, I just felt like that was really big to share, and you guys on YouTube can go and check that out while you're listening. So in that first question, what has your writing journey been like up until this point? And I'm really interested for you to answer that for our audience, because I feel like, we already talked about it before we started recording. So usually people are pretty warmed up by now and always give us a pretty good answer. So
it's been a long journey in terms of when I started writing. So I started putting words on a laptop, so to speak, or penning it on Word, because I started that when I was about 14. I remembered actually being the start of high school and talking with a friend, and I still always will never forget this conversation. And we were reading out the front of our classroom, ready to kind of start for the day. And he's like, "Hey, I wrote this short story," and I read it, and I was like, "This is incredible. This is amazing." And I remembered going home that night and going, "I really want to write something." And it was the first time that I was like, "Oh my God, I actually want to write something." And through kind of a few events online, I found myself on, I'm so bad to say this, but I started on Wattpad, which is very well known. So I started on it when it was a very young website. So it's changed so much. And I was writing on that for about 7 years, and I did fairly well with it, with a few stories. And then I kind of had a little bit of a falling out with it, because I think one of the stories that did really well on it, I didn't want that to be my brand, and I kind of pulled it off and started writing on things that I was a little bit more proud of, and they weren't doing as well. And I kind of had to go back to the drawing board, and I was like, okay, I need to pull off Wattpad, because it was feeling a little bit toxic at the time.
Oh yeah.
And I jumped on a bunch of other websites. I was on a website called Banana for a while, which was really good, because I just wrote short stories on this, and I'd never written short stories, and I did that for months and months and months. And that website was actually where The Girl of Ash and Snow first started.
Oh wow.
And yeah, I remembered writing it, and it actually got really good feedback for the draft. And I think I only wrote about half the book on there before I went into a little bit of a hiatus with it. Eventually, went back to Wattpad, put it on Wattpad, and finished the draft. And it started to do pretty comfortably on there. And everything was going well. And then Wattpad got rid of their like community forums, which was how I was networking and getting friends and sharing my story. And it was through a little bit of mutual complaining with a friend who was also on the site at the time, and she got me onto Discord, and she got me onto a few writing groups on Discord, and that is quite literally where this story it actually started to take shape, because I met people that were amazing, amazing writers and readers, and just passionate about what they did. And, you know, they were a huge reason for the story got off the ground. And one of the members on there, and I know he's going to listen to this, and his name's Robert, and he's an amazing man. He's very, very good at reading and very good at like critically analyzing a book. And I kind of knew that he was a bit blunt with his feedback, but I was like, no, I'll be fine. This is great. This is perfect. And I went into it with such a naive expectation. He got 2/3 of the way into it, and I was like, please stop. I was like, this is like beating a dead horse. So I had a pity party for a few days with it, and then picked myself up, dusted myself off, and pretty much hit the notes, and just didn't rewrite it. I didn't start a whole new book. I pretty much just went back to the start of it, and I just edited it and did really heavy structural editing, and talked to him and really sort of listened to his feedback. And yeah, he was amazing, and kind of the rest is history. And, you know, I kept doing rounds and rounds of editing, and now it's getting ready for release.
Well, it sounds like Robert needs to do the same thing with book 2 for you.
He will get it when I am ready to surrender it to his mercy. He's amazing, but there is like a degree of mental preparation. I want to do a little bit of
for a workout or a marathon.
Yeah, prepare for the marathon. And we jokingly say we get a lot of new guys in this Discord group, and, you know, everyone's got this really enthusiastic, you know, excitement about getting their work read, because we do weekly pairings on the Discord server. So you pair up with someone and you read a few chapters of each other's work. And we always say to guys, we're like, you know, there's plenty of people on here. There's a great list of people. Maybe try these guys first. Don't start with him necessarily first. Especially like if you're not used to
the boss level.
And we're like, if you want to do it, here's the therapy group you may need afterwards. And if you're legally old enough to drink, you may need a drink afterwards. He's like, I say this with such respect for him. He's amazing. He's just very good at what he does. But he doesn't mince words. And if he can see that it's something worth, like, he sees potential in it, he's even harder on it, because he's like, you can do better. So I look, a lot of respect for him, and a lot of undying just adoration for this man and his ability to write stories as well.
It's interesting you say that, because my best friend's pretty similar. Like I told him, I was like, I sent him a little, like, chapter 1 of an urban fantasy I was working on, and I liked how it went, and I sent it to him, and he was like, I love this, but I did not like this. And I was like, are you sure you didn't like it? Like, are you positive? He's like, yeah, no, it didn't work. And he's like, it didn't work for me. I'm like, okay. And I told him, I was like, I really like that, because, you know, then I went back and looked at it, and I was like, oh man, this totally didn't work like how I wanted. So I definitely think, I think it's really good to find people, you know, who will give you really good feedback and criticism. And, you know, again, like you said, right, like really want you do it because they want you to succeed. And I think a lot of people are afraid of that. I actually think it's funny that you mentioned, you know, Robert, because there's a lot of people, I think, who, you know, could use that type of, you know, criticism and critiques and really think about their own writing. I've just seen some people on Twitter last week who were like, I sent 20 people my book, only like 5 people liked it. Should I never write again? And I'm like, 5 people really liked your book. Like, it doesn't matter if the other 15 didn't. Like, maybe it's not their, you know, it's not that your book isn't for them, you know. Like, I know, like, I didn't really like Wheel of Time the first time I tried getting an Eye of the World. And then 10 years later, I loved it, you know. And Dresden Files, sorry, now everybody's going to stop watching this channel. Dresden Files, the first time I went through it, I wasn't really into it, but I wasn't into urban fantasy yet. The first time actually my friend Tyler, happy birthday. It's he had years ago at his birthday, he wanted this book Hounded by Kevin Hearn, so I bought him the first 3. They were on sale, and he's like, you should really try it after you got done reading them. And I was like, no, I'm okay. Well, then when I moved to Phoenix, I was reading them, and they became some of my favorite books. So I just think it's interesting that you say that, because some people are really worried about feedback, and I personally am really excited for it, particularly for my draft too, because I just think I love feedback. I think it's really just really important, and you can't always obviously please everybody, but I think it's interesting to see where if you get somebody good like that, it does make you better, I feel like. So yeah, maybe some people need to practice a little bit maybe on having some thick skin, but I'm a teacher, so I get criticized all the time, so maybe I don't have any skin.
You've got to have, I think you've definitely got to have thick skin. I think thicker skin than I think some people might start writing when they're going into all of this. They're like, yeah, it'll be fine. I'm like, no, sweetie, you're going to need a little bit of thick skin for this. Like, people be brutal.
Yeah. Well,
like, I've got a group of really good, I've got a really good group of beta readers, and like they're all varying degrees of like strengths, but they're all like really critical in the areas that I need them to be. But sometimes it's not easy to like see those comments, because I'll put it up on a G doc, because I write on Word, and then I put it up on G docs so that they can comment and I can work with it a bit easier. But sometimes you see their comments and you're just like, oh, that imposter syndrome just starts to creep in.
I've talked to a couple of people recently who have written like 30 books, and they said that it never goes away. So
no, don't tell me that. I was under some impression that this goddamn imposter syndrome would just leave someday.
Stephen King was just quoted 3 weeks ago, an article that a couple people were sharing around. Dirk Ashton was one of them. I think I got it from. I think it was him. And Stephen King had said the same thing, that he had imposter syndrome.
So. No, I don't want to know that. I want to live in a fantasy world where I do not have imposter syndrome every second day.
The king himself. Like,
so I love his writing. He's just an amazing author.
When I first got onto Twitter about 3 years ago, like back on Twitter, I guess 3 years ago, I looked up Stephen King. I thought I'll be funny to follow him. And his only thing he said in his bio was, "You know who I am."
Oh, I love his tweets too. Like,
yeah.
You have like a lot of really big authors, and they'll occasionally put up tweets, but his are just like genuinely funny at times, and you're just like, it's perfect.
Somebody asked me, like, who's one author you'd like to hang out with? I'm like, I would love to hang out with Stephen King for a day and just like bask in his glory. Like, love to ask him some Dark Tower questions or something like that, or some It questions, I guess. Like, I have a lot of questions for him, a lot of his books, I guess, like Stan, things like that. Yeah, he's a good one. Yeah, if you guys haven't checked him out on Twitter yet, you guys really should. The last few years, he's been especially funny, I feel like. So he's always very comical. I really like this one that you had an idea for. So that number 2, why did you choose self-publishing over traditional? And I really feel like a lot of people maybe don't know why, and maybe it's good for them to hear why other authors have chosen self-publishing over traditional. I think there's still a huge stigma there. We've talked quite a bit about that the last couple of interviews, but I think it's really good again to bring up and get somebody else's opinion on. So there you go.
So when I got towards the stage, it was earlier this year that I really sat down and was like, okay, this is a story I want to pursue. I want to get out into the world. How am I going to do this? And, I tossed and turned between, querying for traditional, which I don't really have a lot of issues with. There's a couple of reasons why I didn't want to go traditional, and I'll sort of touch on that at first. And a lot of it came down to just the control over your own work and the actual license. And I think I'd heard too many, whether this is the greatest reasoning for not going traditional, but you know, the control that you have over your own work and your brand and, you know, your stories and where you want to take them. And I want to write on multiple genres, but I want to keep it all under the same pen name, so to speak. I don't want to have 5 different pen names. I can barely keep track of one. I am not trying to keep track of like 5. But ultimately, a lot of my reasoning, I had to take a long, hard look at sort of my life and my work schedule and all of that. And, you know, in self-publishing, it just offered me control over my work, the flexibility to actually pick my release days and actually structure it around my life and my work. Because so I'm a sailor in the Navy, and I love what I do and it's incredible, but obviously the nature of my job means that I kind of have to have a lot more control over my releasing of my work and when I do it. So it kind of became a no-brainer at that point to go self-publishing. And I didn't want to go through the effort, the effort, but the sort of that journey of, you know, querying and getting an agent and then getting a publishing house. I was like, you know what, I'm gonna do this off my own back. It's either gonna fail or not. It's gonna be on me. But, you know, I've got creative control over my work, and, you know, I've got a really good team behind me, and why not? I had the financial ability through work to be able to do self-publishing, and I have a lot of good friends that are querying and going the traditional route, and I am absolutely championing them for their journey, just as they're doing the same for me. Yeah, it was just traditional. It didn't really gel with kind of where I am at this point in my life. I might do it down the track, I might not. But at this point, I'm self-publishing. It's a terrifying experience. It's not easy. It's not cheap at times, as I've discovered. But I don't regret it. I think, you know, being able to hold my first copy in my hands really only like a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, was the moment I was like, no, I've made the right decision. Like this is my journey now.
Yeah, I think you bring up just some great points. I mean, you know, like I said, we talked quite a bit about this, but I think it still is, again, you know, there's a lot of stigmatism towards, you know, indie publishing, and which is crazy, you know, because you again, you look at, you know, a book like yours with, you know, I have to assume, you know, and I've said this a lot about different, you know, fantasy and sci-fi authors from the indie community. You just have to assume that looking at somebody's book cover, their blurb, you know, and how they're able to describe their book, I really feel like are 3 key things on if I'm going to buy that book. And, you know, I feel like, you know, you have a really good product here. And, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, again, you could have been waiting 2 years, you know, especially during this pandemic, 3 years if somebody did pick it up, you know, and, you know, who knows how long it could have taken. You know, it could have just been that just for, you know, right, when you're querying just for an editor or an agent, let alone, you know, when they're trying to sell, you know, this great book. And, you know, you could be already on, you know, your first done trilogy, you could be on your second trilogy by then, you know, in the same world or something like that, you know, for indie publishing. So, yeah, it's just me and a couple people were talking about Michael R. Fletcher and Dirk Ashton, them for Wizards, Warriors, and Words. If you nobody online has checked them out yet, we reference them a lot. Please go take a look. You know, but they had just talked about this and, you know, the very long process. And it's funny that you said that because Rob J. Hayes had mentioned on there, he's one of the hosts, and he had mentioned actually his horrible experience with his book one with a particular publisher. So yeah, I definitely think you know, some of your fears are well founded there. So I personally like the fact that, you know, like your book, you can just do whatever you want with it. You know, you can up the prices when you want. You can, you know, lower them. You know, you can choose when you're releasing book 2. I definitely think that you're 100% there. It's just a lot nicer to have, you know, free range and control of your baby, basically. So
Yeah. Well, that was, I think, not so much with this series, but the other series that I'm hoping, book 1, hoping I can get released next year, is going to be a little bit more of a paranormal story, a little bit more with an LGBTQ cast, because I'm a sexual author myself, and I really wanted to write that, but I knew that, like, we're seeing, thank God, we are actually seeing a lot more big publishing houses producing a lot of representation for these kinds of books.
Yeah.
But I was concerned that if I tried to query that book, that, you know, if they would try and censor it or change it. And because of the nature of that book, it's, you know, my first kind of book where the whole cast is predominantly queer, and that book holds a very special place as well. And I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not letting a publisher near that, because I want to, yeah, I'm protective of my babies.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think you make a lot of really good points just with that answer alone. And you know, as somebody who almost sold 2 screenplays, but they were going to butcher them, I just decided not to sell them. And I was in high school, and I was just like, I don't want to sell them to you. And you know, years later, I'm like, God, that was probably dumb. But you know, I just, you know, it wasn't for a lot of money even, but which was probably a better thing, you know, because somebody probably would have just taken it and done whatever. But yeah, they already had butchered it, and I was like, no, I'm okay. You know, it's that, yeah, it's hard, right? When you spend all that time and energy on something, and somebody, you know, doesn't. It's not even that they don't like it, right? It's just that they want to make it completely different. You know, especially if you, like you're talking about, right, that like main point, or you know, just the feelings even that you have while writing, you know, the characters, the story, you know, and that feeling that you're connecting with, and that you want the audience to connect with. When someone's trying to change that, it's like, what's even the point at that point? So yeah, it's definitely a interesting market, I think, still for, you know, Indian traditionally published,
Yeah.
because you know, again, it's like you know, like you can, like you said, you can really do whatever you want, you know, and share whatever message. And I think that's what I personally like about indie publishing, you know, is that you can publish that book, I can read it right away, and again, connect with what you connect with, you know, with writing it, as the reader. And yeah, I just think that there's a huge disconnect with traditionally published books, just in general right now, versus indie published books, particularly in fantasy and sci-fi, because I just think that they're really behind. Um, you know, like you got Joe Abercrombie, Brandon Sanderson, and you know, Martha Wells, and these people who are terrific. But you know, I definitely think that there's a lot that we're missing, and you know, in traditionally published, and you can get that in indie published. So
Like
yeah,
I love indie for that reason alone. Just like the stories you find, and you're like, I don't know if I would necessarily find this from a major publishing house, but you're like, this story is just chef's kiss, and you're like, I've encountered. I'm starting to read a lot more indie books now, and it's just so many good books out there.
yeah, it's really hard. You know, before we started filming, I was talking about, you know, Clayton Snyder's Cold West, and that book. It changed. It literally like changed something in my mind for like how like I was writing my own book. And you know, like I was saying, it's a conglomeration of science fiction, a western, and fantasy, and I'm not writing that, but just something about how his prose was there, and the perspectives of his characters just totally shifted. And I think it is really nice that you get so many different outlooks and stories and things like that. And yeah, I just said, actually, it's funny that you mentioned like, you know, the book you're talking about, and my friend and I were just talking about the LGBTQ community, and how, you know, there's, in the traditionally published world, there seems to be a disconnect with, like, I don't know, really, like Wheel of Time's one of those. We're reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, and Steven Erikson just like has LGBTQ communities just everywhere in his books. And it's really interesting because, you know, those are 2 traditionally published authors that have been around for a really long time, and nobody ever seems to mention, you know, their books and these characters in, you know, in the communities. And it's just kind of interesting to me. My buddy and I were just talking about that, and he, you know, we just talked actually last Sunday, and he's like, I just really like Stephen Erickson's books. He's like, I see myself, you know, as part of this community in these books. And he's like, and Stephen Erickson does it in a way where like it doesn't feel, oh, what's the term he used? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel like didn't even feel like he was trying, you know, it just like he just made everybody part of his world, and and just show that they're unique and that they're people. And I don't know, we just felt like he did just a fabulous job, and it wasn't like he was trying to sell books, I guess is really what he was saying. But yeah, it's really cool. And I just really think though that, other than, Gideon the Ninth, like there are some, like that have really, I think in the traditionally published world, right, have really kind of opened that gate, so to speak. But yeah, it's just, to me, there's still a lot more, in indie publishing. And it's just really cool because I think you're getting a lot more in indie publishing, and it's, really cascading into traditionally published books. And I think it's going to be really cool the next, 4 or 5 years to really see the, LGBTQ community really represented more and traditionally published. So.
Oh, like some of the books that I've read, like at the moment, like, well, this one was traditionally published, but it was Cemetery Boys by Aiden
That's
Thomas.
really good.
Oh my God, I read that and I was like, this is amazing, and it felt so good to see that kind of to see that, like, those books like on the bookshelf, and I was like, yes, this is what I want.
See, I didn't know. I'm so glad you said that because I didn't know that was traditionally published. So that's actually really, really good to know.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's got a little publishing house symbol on the corner. I would have to do more digging to see like what house he's with, but I'm pretty sure it is traditionally. Like, I don't think it's indie or self-published in the way that, say, me or a few other authors are. But I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure. I actually have to get off my bookshelf, but I'm pretty sure it is a traditionally published book.
Well, some lately, I feel like, some, certain books like that where so many indie authors have, recommended them, or, I see them a lot. So, and that's what I was just talking to Michael Webb about, is like, it's kind of hard at this point to, it's kind of to pick, and just depending on, where they're published or where you get them, it's like, it's just kind of interesting. But I guess I had said to him, I said, well, I'm looking at a lot of things on Kindle now. And I used to only, go into independently published bookstores or, traditionally published bookstores and, actually get physical books. But now I'm actually, because I'm getting a Kindle, I'm actually reading them on, on my phone and things in the meantime. So it's kind of hard, I feel like, because you're just going to Amazon for most of them, that I don't really know if they're traditionally published. So ends up kind of being a very interesting search, I think, to determine which ones on my shelf are and aren't at this point on my Kindle. So yeah, very welcome. Yeah.
Like, it's really hard, like, when you're on Amazon, because you're like, oh yeah, and it's kind of this misconception that you see like a really, you might see a not so great cover and a not so, or like a really good cover, and you're like, oh, that one's clearly traditionally published. And surprise, surprise, like, I've seen some incredible self-published books with just absolutely amazing covers. One book in particular, by Tally Morgan, their book, The Oracle Stone. I was chatting to them because they offered me an art copy for their book to read and review. And I got like 5 chapters in, and I was like browsing through like where to get the paperbacks, and I ended up just buying a copy off Barnes and Nobles, and I was like, I will review it once I've got the paperback, because this book is amazing. And like 5 chapters in, and I was like, no, I need to pay for this. I need a physical copy in my hand.
Oh yeah.
And they did both the cover, like they did their covers for their stories, and it was just so amazing. Like, I was like, just so much talent.
Oh yeah, I mean, and again, you look at Cemetery Boys, and as soon as that popped up, well, as soon as somebody had recommended that to me on Twitter a few weeks ago, I looked, I was like, gosh, that just sounds really cool. And yeah, it just, again, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm still not sure about this one, if it's traditionally published or not. It does say,
I could be wrong.
well, it says indie bound, but I don't know what that is, because it looks like it's a magazine or something. I have to check that out.
Do some deep dive research.
Yeah. If anybody knows, feel free to comment. It's interesting, right? Again, where we talked about where, again, it's like you have. I think you make a good point there, though, because years ago, it's like, I think I was 8 years ago. I was in Scottsdale, Arizona, and I met Kevin Hearn, Brandon Sanderson, Patrick Rutherfus,
You met Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, before like right after he got done writing. Oh my gosh, help me out here, guys in the audience. It's book 12 or 13 for the Wheel of Time, and then he had just put out the Way of Kings.
I love that book.
I'm saving it for book club with my buddy. We're almost done with Malazan Book of the Fallen, and then we're actually going to do Way of Kings and a couple other ones by Brandon. But oh my gosh, like Warbreaker and Alloy of Law, and then there was another one that I read of his, which I'm totally blanking right now. But like, yeah, I love
Mistborn series.
No, we're actually saving Mistborn. I think I read book 2 of Alloy of Law.
Because I think I'm up to, is it Oathbringer? It's the latest one on the Way of Kings. Or no, it's not the latest one because I thought it was, and then he dropped another one. I was like,
yeah, recently, yeah. What was it, like 2 months ago or something like that? Yeah. Well, I just think it's interesting. With my friend, he's like, "Well, I want to read Way of Kings," and I was like, oh, "I've been waiting for this moment, since I got it from Brandon, like at the bookstore." Yeah.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Oh, it was really cool, and you could tell he was very jet lagged. Brandon, if you're listening to this, it was still awesome to meet you. I definitely want to talk to you, and I didn't even know who he was. Like I had, I was there to meet Kevin Hearn, and then Patrick Rothfuss. I was just like, oh, In the Name of the Wind, yeah, I'll buy that. Have you sign it? And I took pictures of both of them and talked to both of them. But yeah, like I had went and talked to Kevin Hearn, Brian McClellan. Oh man, I talked to Michael J. Sullivan was there. He was funny, right? He goes, because at the time, and I'm not saying that, I was the reason for this, but at the time, his first 3 books did not have numbers on them. And I had went all over to try and find one of his books. And they were so popular that you couldn't find one. And I had found out he was going to be there late within 5 days. So I had ordered, I think, book 1. It hadn't gotten there yet. And what I thought was book 1 was book 2. So I took it to have him to sign, and he was teasing me. He's like, "You're not even going to bring me book 1?" And I was like, "Don't say it on the side." I said, "How do you know which one's book 1, 2, and 3?" And now, just saying, you go to Barnes and Noble, this says 1, 2, and 3 on the spine. So, not saying it was me, but I just thought it was really funny, and it's always a cool anecdote. But yeah, there was like so many people there, and it was really cool. There's so many people I have on the bookshelf too that like I'm trying to track down and everything. But yeah, I met like 14 indie authors, and I didn't know that they were indie. Because again, like you said, like they had amazing covers. Their books sounded fantastic. Yeah, and it was a very interesting mix of traditional and indie authors. And yeah, it was very interesting. And especially now, like that was 8 years ago. And it's interesting now to see a book like Cemetery Boys, and you're like, I don't know if that's traditionally published or indie published, versus when I was looking at indie published books at that time, when there were very few that, you could definitely, put on the bookshelf, at Barnes and Noble, and you wouldn't be able to tell. Whereas now it's like, I feel like 60, 70% of them, you wouldn't be able to tell if you just printed them off, put them at Barnes and Noble. You couldn't tell if that was a traditionally published book, or indie published book. And I think it's really cool that, we're at that point, because I definitely think, Michael Webb and I talked about this too. And, I definitely think it really helps out the whole community, right? Because it just makes traditionally published, up the ante. And, again, like you said, really look at, maybe we have to bring in, different communities that we haven't thought of before, different stories, different characters, different backgrounds, things like that. My buddy and I were just talking about this. We really think that's the way of traditionally published for the future, is, really to be all inclusive. And, I think that's how you get better stories personally. So.
Well, you have to. One of the really good things that I learned was I'm following an author at the moment, and her book just made New York Times bestseller. It was the book Iron Widow, and it's super amazing. And the author was talking about, like, she approached, she had the agent, and they approached like all these American publishing houses, and all of them said no. And like she ended up signing with a Canadian publishing house, and it was, because these other houses, they didn't want to touch a story that had it's a YA like fantasy science fiction kind of story, sort of a science fiction retelling of China's first female emperor. And like it's across of Yu-Gi-Oh, like you've got mechas, you've got polyamory, and like a bunch of other things, and it's that's the one.
Yeah, I put it on Goodreads. I think it was actually 2 weeks ago, actually. Yeah, about 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it looked and sounded incredible.
And just her story with it, and just the book itself. Like I've started reading it as well, and it is just freaking amazing, and well worth all of its all the hype that's around it. So I'm excited to sink into it once I actually have a few more days to breathe and read.
Yeah, and it's I was talking to my buddy because again we were talking about Mal's and Book of the Fallen, and we were just discussing that how just how we were saying like for so long, particularly in fantasy, and sci-fi, it's like that's what we both like to read, and he's like it just I think he stayed away from a lot of different things because he just couldn't see himself in those roles, and he was like I have a lot of things to say, and he's like who's to say that I couldn't do these things, and I was like that's actually a really good point. So for like my fantasy world in particular, like he's helped me out a lot where I've really changed a lot of different things over the past few years, especially just because I'm like I don't have anybody like this person I've met, or from this type of country, or from this type of background, or who have had these problems, and just all sorts of different things, and I just think it's interesting to actually put them into a fantasy setting, because they are represented in our own world. And yeah, I just think you get better stories that way. And for me, it's like made things so much easier to write because, I just have more people to talk to, and get more personalities or backstories or, real life experiences, and can kind of put them into a fantasy setting. And I just think it, kind of feel like we've been gypped for a long time because we've only had these stories from these people, and there's so many other people. It's a lot like different ethnicities and things like that haven't been represented a lot within the fantasy and in sci-fi setting, except for the last like several years. There's only so many European based fantasy stories that I feel like a person can read, and like this is a good example because I really love like Asian history and artwork, and I'm a huge into martial arts and stuff. So just getting just a different perspective of culture, even within fantasy, I think is just a huge step for everybody. So, and then when you add different communities of people in there, I think it just makes just a much better story, and it just makes a better community, I think, because a lot more people will be more open to reading better stories on different characters.
Well, it's definitely there's so much to. I'm just so happy that there's more representation out there. I actually just picked up a book with two Arrow romantic characters. I can't talk too much about the book itself because I haven't actually read it. It literally only just arrived through Amazon today.
Oh, okay.
Because I spoke to Tally, I sent them a message and I was like, hey, while I'm waiting for your book to get delivered, do you have any like recommendations? Because you don't have any other books of yours I can buy. Can I have some recommendations of representation? And gave me this amazing list of books. And there's so many out there. So I'm excited
to see that. Actually, that would be great because I have a lot of different people that are always asking me, and I try to give them really good ones. But it's just like you said, there's just so many books and stories out there. So I feel like I'm always missing really good stuff. So yeah, I'd love to have that and pass it on to them. So,
well, once I've read it, I will. When we do our next recording, I'll actually, if you remind me, we'll talk about it because I should have read it by then.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I'm always like, and one of my friends is like, "Have you read my book yet?" I was like, "I'm trying, buddy." I was like, "I got distracted." I was like, Scott Owen sent me this really good book, Gates of Fire, recommendation. This historical fiction book. So I've been like trying to go through that, and then I got caught back on. Benjamin and I are talking about doing like a Dresden Files after I get caught up, and we want to do one of those. So I'm reading like 5 books right now, and it's not the most efficient way for me to read. So I need to just not sleep, like then.
I need to not sleep so I can finish my editing of book 2 and finish writing all this other stuff and not have my brain go, hey, here's a really good idea for another series. Like I'm writing 2 separate series at the moment, and I've already got an idea for 2 other series that I just had to like quickly write down notes for. So if I do go back to it, I can take it, pick it up in maybe a few years' time.
Yeah.
But I was like, I had to like stop myself. I'm like, nope, don't start it. Just put the notes and just put it away.
Yeah. I had that shiny syndrome for a long time. That's why I'm just trying to finish this one book and then at least draft 2, and then I'll go to like the shiny new thing. But squirrel, like new story idea, and that was me for like 4 years. So I got like 5 books written to like 20 to 30,000 words, but then I got like nothing else done for them. So definitely know that feeling. How about that third question there? What lessons have been the hardest to learn but the most helpful in terms of maybe your writing or characterization? It really could be anything. I always think this is an interesting one because some people always, it's like my students sometimes ask a question and I don't ever expect their answer. We've gotten some pretty good ones for this one.
So I think the best sort of lesson that I've learned, and I can see this really clearly on how it's affected me with both book 1 and 2. So, and that is just write your goddamn draft. Just get it down. It can be absolute garbage. There can be plot holes. It can be atrocious. There can be spelling errors. Stop going back and editing each chapter as you go. Just leave the burning pile of trash until you're finished.
I feel called out right now.
No, I'm also calling out myself because I did that for the Girl of Ash and Snow. Like I think I re-edited like the first few chapters so many times, and I think that's why it took me like nearly a year to write the whole draft. And that was only for 110,000 words, and then I completely ignored what I did for that and was like, okay, I'm just going to write the draft. It can be absolute garbage, but we're going to get a draft out and go from there. And like book 2 at this stage is 170,000 words, and I wrote that in just under 4 months. So the timeline difference is huge. But yeah, editing is just do it once you've got your draft out, and take breaks, because I think people you kind of underestimate like how quickly you can burn out with a book. And sure. I think there's definitely been times when I've written books or I've been in the middle of writing and my brain is just like, nope. And I've only written 1,000 words that day. And, I might have planned to write 5,000 or 6,000 words. I can't do that every day. And there's definitely days, where I might be really enjoying that sweet imposter syndrome, or, just really hating the series or the book, or just not mentally in a spot to write. And for so long, I beat myself up about, not writing every day, and, and having these thoughts, and, and beating myself up for taking breaks. And now I'm just like, as soon as my head gets into those spots where I'm like, okay, my brain's not going to let me write, I'm just going to close the laptop and I'm going to go watch Netflix for the next 3 days and just let my brain decompress. Because like I have some highs and lows with, mental energy with writing. So I just do not even try to force it now when it doesn't want to come, because it's not going to make my work any good, and it's not going to do any good for my mental health.
Oh yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think that's, like I said, before we start filming, I just have this stupid character that decided to switch his, entire self, like on, yesterday. So now I have to like wait a couple of days to let it sit and marinate, and then go back, look at the research, and see if I actually want to let him change. But he seems pretty adamant about it. So yeah, I definitely understand that.
I feel you. Like when I wrote The Girl of Ash and Snow for the first draft, because I had no intention initially to publish it, I was just writing it for the hell of it. I was pantsing the shit out of it, so I had no plot, like no planning for it. I was like, I'm just gonna write this like dumpster fire, and we're gonna see how we go. Because I was just writing it for myself. I had no intention of letting anyone really like beyond sort of the casual followers that I had online, I had no real desire or dream to make it a paperback. I was like, yeah, it's just going to get shoved in the files. And I just like, oh, okay, just learning all that process and going through it. And I was like, but I had no plan for that book. And then I had a loose idea at one point for like the series, and it was some god awful way I had structured the series. And I was like, this is atrocious. But I was like, no, but it'll be fine. But it wasn't until probably about halfway or three-quarters of the way through it, I actually started to have a little bit more of a structure for the series. And originally it was a trilogy, and then I ended up breaking the last sort of the last book into two, because I was like, no, that thing's going to be like 500,000 words if I don't split it. So, you know, that's kind of how I've ended up with 4 books, and I've actually got a plan. Like, by the time I finished book 1, I had a really solid plan for the series and pretty much had the title of book 2 pretty quickly. And we've just locked in the title of book 3, because that's currently with the cover company who did book 1 and book 2. They're creating book 3's cover and all of that. So once I'm hoping to get the draft of that in the next few days. So I'm super excited.
Yeah, that's cool. That's awesome. So what is your favorite genre to write in, and why?
I feel like that should be a little bit obvious with fantasy, but
you know,
look,
I'm surprised though, because some people had said, like, I was like expecting fantasy, or a couple people that write sci-fi, and they're like, oh, I actually like writing fantasy more. But it just, like me, I actually really want to write science fiction and urban fantasy. But unfortunately, I'm just not there yet. So yeah, we've had some interesting answers, but
look, I love writing fantasy. I think it kind of comes in part of the fact that I've been writing it for so long now. I would love to write science fiction, but I'm like you as well. I'm just like, I am nowhere near. I think I've started a couple of science fiction projects. I remembered writing a draft for a series for one book, and I think I started writing the sequel to it, but then it just kind of got lost to the void. I don't even think I've got a digital copy of that draft anywhere now. I would love to write science fiction, but I'm not there yet. And also all the science stuff, like there's way too much like maths and science that I have to like wrap my head around to at least make it a story with science fiction that I want to tell.
I would hire somebody. I talked my friend talked about that, how he talked about how he hires somebody to do the science for him, and like a developmental editor, he does a science developmental editor, so that he checks his his science for his science fiction. And he also has a friend who used to be in the military, in the Marines, and it's like a military sci-fi. So he's been having somebody go over it to be like a military developmental editor. And I'm like, yeah, that's such a good idea, because I thought about doing that for like quite a few things. Like I got this one like idea where I just wanted to be like basically like a whole Native American world kind of thing with like urban fantasy. And I'm like, I don't know that much, and no matter how much I read, I feel like I'm not going to get it right. And I thought, well, it'd be really cool to talk to somebody who actually knows these things, and to really work on it with. So yeah, I think I would have to do that with somebody with science fiction though. Like I'd have to because I feel like you either have the hard sci-fi people, or people like me who like really don't care. They just want a good story and good characters. But yeah,
I just want to write a story about just space pirates. Just let me write my space pirates.
Yeah, but like someone's gonna be like, they could not get to that world, or like like they would not be able to do interplanetary travel, based off of your technology. And I've known a lot of sci-fi authors who have done the hard science with somebody or themselves, and have been like, oh my gosh, like this is totally how it is. And I'm just like, yeah, like everybody would probably hate my science fiction right now with the science part. So I was like, I'll just stick to fantasy in the meantime. But yeah, I think it'd be really cool to, I love the planets though, like I've been looking into and researching the moons within our solar system. And I came up with like a really good, because we have so many moons that have water. on them, like ice and everything, or like maybe water underneath. I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if the aliens within our solar system were actually on these moons and were actually aquatic? And I thought that would be like a really cool, like they'd have to have water with them in their suits, or something, kind of like, like Admiral Akbar or something like that from like Star, but like and like I kind of world built some different things, and it is kind of interesting though. And this is why I like science fiction, is like I actually looked into a lot of history with like ancient aliens and stuff, and there are quite a few that had talked about being visited, like ancient peoples talked about being visited by like aquatic aliens, which nobody ever talks about. So I actually just inserted that into a science fiction story that I was writing. But yeah, but then I got hung up on, all the actual science research. So I thought, why not just write the story and then give it to, like him, and just my friend, just give it to somebody who's actually good at science, which is probably like anybody else other than me. So.
Oh, I'm so bad at it. Like, I was an English kid at school, and
me too. Yeah.
I struggled so hard with science. So I was like, I think if I do it, it's just going to have to be something I'm going to have a lot of spare time to do research and to actually figure out how I want to tackle it. Because, like, I got a lot of ideas, but I don't know, nothing's really standing out for a story that I really want to sit down and commit to yet. So, getting there.
Yeah, and and a lot of people I talked to too, like talked to quite a few people who had moved on, and they said, it's probably better to stick with fantasy for a while if that's what you're better at, get a little bit of a name out there, and then, hopefully people will, some people will jump with you to your sci-fi series, or, you'll get a new, genre community, and then, you either have the joint one and then two separate ones. So you almost have like three different communities. That definitely seems to work for quite a few people that I've seen. So yeah, I'm like, just like you, I'm like, yeah, I don't really have any real story. I'm like, I just like researching science fiction stuff. So like probably should have a story before writing a book, I guess. But
yeah, I've got so many other projects at the moment. I'm just kind of resisting the urge to tackle anything like sci-fi at the moment. So I was like, no, I need to finish, the Girl of Ash and Snow series. I need to finish that, and then maybe I will tackle it. But I know that as I say that, I'm going to get to like book 4 and already have the next 2 series lined up. Or
yeah. Or you're gonna watch like another episode of Firefly and be like, "Ooh, shiny." Like, that's always. I stay away from that. I stay away from science fiction shows right now until I'm done with this fantasy book, because I will get so. And then like I start watching superhero stuff, and I'm like, oh, I have like a couple of those ideas. I'm like, yeah, I'm like, my wife, she's like, you gotta just write this stupid book before you can look at it. And I'm like, no, I understand. So what do you think the easiest thing is to write what do you think the easiest thing? What is the easiest thing to write about when it comes to creating? I don't even think that makes sense.
Is this the character question?
It's number 5. I've been up all day. What do you think the easiest thing is in terms of your writing process? Like, do you think it's characterization? Do you think it's creating characters? Do you think it's, it just seems like you have really good characterization, first of all. But I want to know, like, is that the easiest thing for you, or is it maybe like world building? Is it coming up with the overall, plot and story structure of your book? Like, what's the easiest thing for you in terms of writing like this first book, or just your writing just in general? Like, what comes the easiest to you? I feel like I always come up with really cool world building ideas, but my characterization is pretty weak.
So my stories, and they always seem to kind of start off in very much the same fashion, but a lot of the times it's the first chapter, and I have no idea with the characters, the world. I have a loose scene in my head, and I roll with it, and from there the characters take shape first, and then the world kind of starts to expand and kind of ripple outwards in terms of that. Like the Girl of Ash and Snow, the opening scene in the draft, and the scene is still in the book, it's just not the first paragraph, so to speak. And it was the character, it opens on like a cliff face, and you've got these team of climbers scaling this sheer cliff that kind of disappears up into the clouds, and you have these sweeping mountains in one, like in front of you, and then behind you you've just got this lowland and the rest of the kingdom. And it was kind of that scene like them on the side of the cliff, and that was the opening moment. And I find that that's the easiest for me, is okay, I just let the opening moment come to me. And then characters, depending on the story, like tackle characters kind of in two different ways. One, I will actually sit down and write pages for them, and it's mainly just their backstories, what happens to them in the series. I don't really plan at the start. I just kind of do their backstory, who they are, and just kind of roll with it for a few days and, tweak it as I go. I might go onto Pinterest and find a photo that I can just stick on the Word document that no one will see. This is just purely for as just a general reference, or just so I can loosely remember what the person's hair color and stuff is, or a quick visual. Or I will write the story, and I will just let the character sort of develop as they do with the series, which is probably not the best method for everyone. It just kind of happens. Sometimes I will write a whole draft with a character and I'm still a little bit uncertain with sort of their reactions, and their story and their personality might not get really come out until I start the editing process. So that's the fun thing. I try not to confine my work too much with planning. I'll plan a bit and just let things go, and then tweak and sort of try and not force things too much, because I found that when I was planning too heavily and getting too finicky with characterization, or getting too finicky with it, it was feeling too wooden. It was I kind of wanted to, okay, I'm going to put this character in this situation and I'm just going to let them react and we'll just see how they go. And it's worked really well for me so far. And that's pretty much how I think Ren's character came out, was like when I was writing the first chapter, and she's doing her job, and then pretty quickly on she faces off with a wyvern, and I would be terrified, and she's just like, yep, this is not a good day. And she freaks out a little, but still manages to hold her ground. But I didn't know much about her backstory when I was writing this character. I kind of originally just had her as one thing, and then as I was writing the series and really developing what I wanted to do with this character and really where I wanted to take her for the series, all these little things started to creep in, and then I would go back and tweak it, and the character just really developed from there.
I'd be interested to know what Pinterest.
No one is seeing my folders.
I bet you I could send you a couple of art from Pinterest and just ask you, is this what you were thinking? There's a couple that I have from Pinterest actually that I really like a couple of characters from, from Pinterest. I set a timer for myself on there, and I only allow myself 5 minutes, because otherwise, then I'm like, oh, but then I like that character for this story idea, and then all of a sudden I saved 100 photos and haven't written anything that day. So definitely helpful, like you said, right? If you need, some sort of characterization photo or portrait, or I love doing that. It always helps until I go onto Pinterest and waste 3 hours.
Well, I had one picture, and it was actually my screensaver on my other laptop for 2 years. And it was a scene of this mountain scene, and it had this absolutely stunning castle built into the cliff face, and sort of dragon ornaments all through it, and it was incredible. And I was like, yeah. And so little elements of that has kind of sowed the seed for elements of my story, and I was like, that is an absolutely awesome picture.
That's super cool. So what do you think one part of the writing process is for you that you struggle with the most? Or maybe it could even be your process. I know trying to restructure my novel with a draft 2, and not just trying to fix it and then rewrite a whole nother book, trying to like restructure the outline, makes sense. And then to fit in, like you were saying, like those characterizations to make it a little bit better, because now they're talking to me before they ignored me. I know that's been really difficult for me, but like what's one part of your writing process that you struggle with the most, do you think?
So it's kind of, I'd say two things, and it's very much like you. It's resisting the urge to like fully scrap the book, like when I'm going through it and just writing it. So, and I'm noticing it a little, obviously now I'm going through and actually doing a bit more structural work and the first run through with book 2. And it's,
oh good, there's
hope. I know that I've already made a list of like scenes and chapters that I need to add in, and it's trying to figure out, okay, where am I doing this? What am I taking out? So I struggle with that because I'm just like trying to get everything. It's like assembling a jigsaw puzzle, but not really knowing what the actual picture is. It's just putting pieces and hoping they fit. And then the second one is marketing, which is just a whole just monster on itself. And like I just get days and I'm just like so burnt out, and I'm just like, I don't want to do any marketing, so I just won't market for like 3 or 4 days because I'm just like, I can't bring myself to sort of sit down for a couple of hours and really do marketing. I should be marketing a lot more than I am. I'm just so busy at the moment, and I'm just but marketing is it's a monster I'm slowly learning, and I will eventually figure it out and not be so terrible at it. I could read a lot more sort of tips and stuff, but I think at this point there's only so much, unfortunately, that I can read with all this advice columns and stuff, because before it's like, okay, I learn best by trial and error. So I've made a lot of mistakes with this book launch and with the book in general and the whole process. And I did beat myself up a little bit with it at the start. But now I'm not punishing myself as much and learning with those mistakes, but just learning how to market is just such a process.
Oh yeah, it's like you have to be, like Dirk Ashton talks a lot about it. You got to be, 8 different people all in one, and it's like it's hard enough to, we were talking, me and Tilt Holt, and we were talking about how, somebody had DNF'd for her, like pretty ridiculous, like pretty late, like I think it was like 80 or 85% or something like that, and and then left like a 1-star review, and we were just discussing her first episode with me where it's like, like we spent so much time and energy and even money, right, for indie authors, to present the product, but then it's like the books don't just sell themselves. Like you have to actually then sell your book and then learn how to sell your book. And it's definitely a process. And it's and you see so many great books, like I said, like Michael Webb, like I was like, I'm everywhere. Like it's what I thought, at least, I'm like, and then your book too, I'm like, how did I not see these 2 books, and then somebody else, I had about 4 more people pop up for me last week, and I'm like I'm scouring the internet for you people. I'm like, how, I'm like, how, and all these groups and things, and I'm like, how am I missing you guys, and but it just goes to show, right, there's just so much out there.
It's not you, it's me with my terrible advertising skills and trying to, I swear to God, they're like, what happened to seeing you? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I'm just atrocious at the internet. I am a social hermit. I barely leave my apartment. And like I sort of dabbled a little bit with TikTok, but I hate like having my face and doing video recordings and stuff. I just feel so uncomfortable with it. And I see it work really well for other authors, but I'm just like, I can't commit to the hours. Like my work life is just so busy, and the amount of hours I was just like, I'm just going to stick with Twitter, and eventually when I get my act together, I'll do Instagram a bit more as well, but I will get there.
Yeah, marketing is that beast where that's what I was saying with, like, I'm just trying to, play around with the, just the podcast advertising and stuff, just to kind of, just to see what groups, people are actually, interested in and things like that, and I just want to even just see the formatting alone. And I feel like if I waste $50 on advertising this podcast, like, and only get like 4 people for subscribers, I feel like it's a win. And but if it's a book, and I do that and I don't get a lot, I'm going to feel really bad. I feel like, so I'm going to put up the podcast on advertising and kind of try to learn from that a little bit more. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I'm like, it's like, I was just listening to somebody like, marketing is like an ocean, and you still have to, build the boat yourself when you're an indie author. And I feel like that was right on
Build the boat, learn how to sail when you've never sailed before, and you can't even swim when you're doing this, so you'd have no swimming skills, and if you fall off the boat,
there's no stars, by the way, like it's just overcast. So
no, and then it gets stormy and choppy, and you're like, I am not prepared for this.
Shark infested waters, there's a crack or 5 surrounding your boat the whole time. Yeah, it's definitely marketing for indie in a nutshell.
I get why so many people do go down like the traditional path, because learning how to like do all the marketing yourself is so daunting. And like a lot of the guys that I talk to, with the reasoning why a lot of them go traditional is just the marketing side of it, also the financial side of it, because self-publishing can be a costly venture in a few different ways. And I feel like the moment I just keep hemorrhaging money trying to get this book off the ground.
Oh yeah, like my friend asked, because I'm like doing like I'm a teacher, but like I do a lot of other things, and he's like, well, you're working really hard. I said, well, I have to work hard now, because I was like, I don't want to have to work harder later. I said, I want to have the money set aside for advertising and and book covers and edits and things like that, at least for the first 3 books, and first trilogy. And then, I said, if you, the more money you have for advertising, I'm like, and the better your advertising campaign. And, I'm like, you're just going to do better. I said, or marketing campaign. I said, and I know a couple of people actually, which I thought was interesting, who actually hired, like a marketing agency to help them market their book and, and themselves, which I thought was kind of interesting. So I might actually look into doing that, or just get some sort of, like marketing consultant or something like that. Because I'm not very good at it. So maybe that'll be a genius move by me later, and we could talk about it on the podcast. But in the meantime, it's just a thought, I guess. But
no, I would love to do that. I think I would love to sort of look at that probably once I've released at least maybe book 2, and I've got a little bit more, hopefully some income coming in, because my family's like, they're like, oh, we want to really support you. Are you? They have this, I think, misconception that I'm immediately going to make all my money back in the first month. That I'm going to have all these books sold, and I'm going to be raking in the money. And I'm just like, statistically, I think you have to, for a lot of indie authors, it's like you almost need to get like 4 or 5 books out to develop enough readership. So like I said to my mum one day, I was like, yeah, like it's probably going to be about 3 or 4 years before I'm like really turning a decent profit, maybe at least 12 months to break even. And she just looked at me and she's like, wait, what? And I'm like, I'm not doing this for money straight off the bat. Like this is not immediately going to be a get rich quick scheme. Like this is a slow hike.
Yeah.
This is not a sprint.
I don't know. I mean, you never know. You could be like Michael and then bust out 15,000 copies, in the next, 10 to 13 months. That'd be great. I mean, you got a great looking product. I mean, it sounds really interesting, so hopefully, like that's why I was trying to tell a friend of mine. He's like, well, how much are you going to advertise? I said, we're going to advertise a bit, but not like super crazy. But it's like I always say on here, you're 1 click away, and I feel like that's Amazon, or just indie publishing in a nutshell. It takes one person, right, to share, at the right time, and then all of a sudden, like it just it goes crazy. So really hoping that that's the case for you. So
well, I mean that raises
there, so
that raises a really good point. I think like case in point, and I'm going to say that I've read this series. So there was a series that blew up on TikTok, and if anyone is prolific on Book Talk, will probably know exactly what series I'm talking about. But it was earlier this year. This TikTok person reviewed this book called Ice Planet Barbarians, and it is essentially just that science fiction romance kind of series, and you're gonna look it up too, aren't you?
I am. Yeah. It's just wait. Somebody just sent this to me, like literally 2 days ago.
Because so this book, like the author has been writing for like the past 7 years, and I think I Spot the first book of this series, and there's 22 books in this first series alone.
Wow.
And then there's a spin-off, and I may or may not have read most of the spin-off as well. And like, you know, she was doing really well, and she is doing really well. But this series just exploded on TikTok, and like it hit international magazines, and she actually got picked up by a publishing house who have just redone the book covers for, I think, for the first 2 books of one of her series. So I think Barnes and Nobles and all that have got like the special edition covers, which look incredible. And I'm super happy for this author. Like, she's amazing. But, you know, the power of the internet and right place at right time, because, you know, the books were doing really well, but then they just exploded into this international phenomena in a matter of weeks and months, and was everywhere. So yes, I have read it.
Yeah, they look good. But like my friend, she was like, "You should ask this person to be on your podcast." I said, "Well, I'll ask anybody." So
oh my god, if you can get Ruby Dixon, the author, on there, oh my god, she would be an amazing person to pick her brain.
Yeah, it looks really cool. Yeah, I know. I'm trying. I don't think they sent me this cover though. I think they sent me a different cover. But yeah, and I was like, "Oh, this sounds really cool." Yeah, it's just interesting, right? Where yeah, it's just you're just one click away. I said that to a couple of people. I said that to quite a few of my friends lately. They're like releasing books, within the next 6 months. I'm like, as I said to Michael too, the other day, I said, Michael Webb, I said, you're just one click away, and you just never know. So hopefully you're the same way, right? Hopefully you're just, one click away. So that'd be really, really cool.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I have my fingers crossed. Next Ice Planet Barbarian. That'd be awesome. Well, so you've actually given us quite a few, for number 8 there, like authors like you would recommend, or just like books. So, I mean, I feel like we've gotten like some really good ones, but do you have any other ones? I feel like you have some really unique ones that a lot of people have sent to me, but it's good because I don't have them right here in front of me. So, are there any other authors or books like you're really into right now that you'd recommend?
That implies I've had time to read.
I know, right?
So I just got the 3rd book from an author called Scarlett Sinclair. She's written a Hades and Persephone retelling, and a really good series. I've got, what's the 3rd one? A Touch of Malice is the 3rd book. So book 1, I think, is A Touch of Darkness. Book 2 is A Touch of Ruin, and so on. She's really good. Another author that's actually on the Discord server that I'm on, and has written 2 books, and I'm not sure when the 3rd one's coming out, but Heather Smith, she writes werewolf books, so she's got 2 out at the moment. Absolutely incredible. She's another self-published author, and I highly recommend people checking out her work. First one is Shadow of Twilight, which is just a werewolf romance book, but it is amazing with how she's written it, and so I devoured it. I was also one of the beta readers for it as well.
Oh, that's cool.
So I saw that book from its like early infancy to that day I finally held a paperback copy in my hands, and I was like, this was so exciting.
That's awesome. Oh, actually, yeah, Heather Smith. I just started following her on Twitter. I think I have her in my 2nd round here for trying to get for February. She wrote. Yeah. Yep. The Shadows of Twilight. Yep. She would be the one.
She's incredible. Yeah, we're on the same Discord server, and she was I was one of her early beta readers, and I highly recommend her series. It's just amazing, and she does not get nearly as much credit as she should for her work. I've got so many books on my bookshelf, but I'm just like, I don't know which one to recommend next. I haven't done as much reading as I want to.
So, I mean, like, yeah, those have been some really good ones. Because it's funny because you mentioned a lot of people on here today that like people have just sent me within literally the last like 3 weeks, or that I like Heather I found I think maybe like 3 or 4 days ago, because I've been trying to find a lot of people, just like newer people, and I feel like again it's a lot like the community itself, where it's like you want to hear from different people because they have a different perspective. And I've been really trying just to like find all sorts of different books in the fantasy and science fiction community. And I feel like a lot of people neglect a lot of different subgenres and things like that. So I'm trying to get a lot more people on, like just in general, like paranormal romance, just really just whatever. Everybody's welcome as long as it's not fiction or not fiction, as long as it's, yeah. Because like some people ask me about horror, I'm like, I consider horror or or supernatural stuff, I consider that fantasy, and they might have some real world elements like urban fantasy, but I put those kind of things all in the same world. Yeah, so I was just trying to kind of go about it. But yeah, Heather's book seems her series seems really cool. So
Well, she was actually the reason I got the cover company that I did. So I ended up going with a company called Miblart, so Miblart.
you got to get out of my head. I just found them yesterday.
They are incredible. They are the
covers.
Yeah, they created book one's cover. They've created book two's cover.
Wow.
And they're creating book three's cover at the moment, because they had a discount like Christmas special on. I think it's over now, and it was like 25% off for their ebook and paperback kind of bundle that they do. So I just get that every time, and they're so good because I can pretty much go, hey, this is what I want, but I don't have a blurb. I barely finished the draft, and they can pretty much give me back a product, and then when I'm ready to release the book and I actually have a blurb, I just email them and be like, hey, I've got the blurb, can we chuck it on now? And they're really good for those kinds of changes and working with me, and just so quick. I highly recommend them as a company, and obviously they are the reason I have such a stunning cover. So
yeah, I mean I was curious because I was like, and not that the ones that they're advertising weren't amazing, but I was just like, I just want to know people who have worked with people who I'm trying to work with, and because I don't want to fall into a, like I said, like a Rob J. Hayes scenario where it's like, oh my gosh, like I feel like the first person I had do my logo for my book series, like I just wanted something for the website, and I feel like I spent too much and I didn't get the best. And they asked me like later on, they're like, well, make sure, if you're not totally thrilled with it, like let us know. Well, they completely shut down their entire like Twitter account, could never find, like their website was down, just like one of those, learning experiences. But I was like, ever since then, I'm just like, I just want to know somebody that knows that person. So I'm so glad that you brought them up, because yeah, I'd love to get hold of them and see what they could do for me in the future. They have some great looking covers. Particularly, I really like their urban fantasy ones. So I'm so glad that you mentioned them, because that's just really great to know that you had such a great cover from them. Yeah.
Oh, and they're so quick with their turnaround. Like, I think there's a little bit of delay at the moment because they're really busy at the moment, which I was like, I'm literally in no rush. Book three is not coming out till at least 2023. I'm not in any huge rush. It was just you guys had a sale on, and
yeah.
I like buying book covers for books I haven't finished yet.
I know that feeling, or just in general.
But I think, book covers, the expression "don't judge a book by its cover," it's such an outdated expression now, because that is how we buy books.
Yep.
And especially on Amazon, where you're quickly scrolling through and you want something that's eye-grabbing, like just eye-catching. And yeah, I was like, no, this is going to be something I am going to invest money in. So that, the formatter, and the editor were like the three main expenses for this book. And the book cover it had to convey certain elements with the book. So that's why there's a dragon on it. There's a reason. That's why there's a burning village in the background. That's why Ren's on the cover. Even the sword that she's got has a lot of significance as well. So there's a lot of little elements with that series, with the story itself, that they brought to life on the cover. And invest in your covers. That is like the best advice I can give, is just invest in a good cover.
I gotta say, I've seen a lot of covers that they did, on their website. Yours has to be my favorite they've done so far. So yeah, it definitely showcases like, just different. I don't know how to explain it. Like it showcases a different style than I think personally that they're showing, at least from the couple of pages that I saw of, their advertised covers.
Well, they're really really good. Like before I went to them, I was like, okay, well, I need an idea of what I want for a cover. So I browsed Pinterest for like a bunch of kind of just fantasy covers and just tried to go, okay, well, what's eye-catching to me? And I found a few that I really like style-wise, and I pretty much just gave them a few different covers, and I was like, hey, like I like this from this cover, this from this cover, and here's my story, and here's the elements that I want, and they're really good. And like I was actually really flattered after they made the cover that my book cover was actually part of their advertising scheme for their company for quite a few months after they'd made it. Like it was on like their banners and stuff, and I was like, oh look, that's my book.
Yeah. That's super cool. Yeah, it looks terrific.
They're incredible. I'm super excited for book 3 because obviously book 1's got a very gold theme. Book 2 is it's much darker. It's got a more of a red theme to it, and then book 3's got a very dark and stormy kind of blue theme. So very excited when I get the draft for that.
Yeah. That's super cool. So right here for this last one, just because I know we got about 4 minutes till the recording runs out on Spotify, we want to make sure we let people know where to find your books. So obviously, by the time this recording comes out, people will be able to go onto Amazon, correct?
Yes.
The book. And then you said the 16th, so 2 days later from this recording for the physical copy.
Yeah, so it'll largely depend on sort of once I've uploaded it to Amazon, how quickly they actually approve it, because the whole process with them can be a bit messy.
Yeah.
So hopefully between the 14th as late as the Friday, so the 17th, it will be available. But the ebook will be available on the 14th. It's part of the Kindle Unlimited program, so if you're part of that, you can download it for free and read it that way. Otherwise, Barnes and Nobles, as I didn't know until you showed me.
Yeah.
So Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. If you want a signed copy, check out my website, which is just cmquinnauthor.com. It's on my Twitter bio and all of that as well. There are some limited signed copies still available if you would like to order them, and there will be some merchandise boxes as well with signed copies. So I got a bunch of custom art made for mugs, bookmarks, key rings, posters. So the map in the book is a poster. So lots of little goodies that'll be available on my website shortly for purchase.
Oh, that's really cool. I know, and just so you know, if you want to send me any of your socials too, or anything, I'll put those all in the description. We get 5,000 characters for all 3 of the sites that we're on for the podcast. So we'll put all those in the description for you, including the Barnes and Noble that I found for you. So we'll put that in there as well. That way people can go right there and check that out. So we'll get all those on there for you. Again, really want to thank you for coming on, Chloe. It's been great chatting with you today. Like I said, really can't wait to have you back for February She Wrote, and really hope, good luck this week. If there's anything, we can do to help you out, and, send anything to me, obviously, that you want shared, and, on Twitter and things like that. And I'll make sure those get shared with everybody as much as possible. And, we'll try to help you have a really good opening week here for book 1. And everybody listening, thank you so much for tuning in. I know a lot of people are probably like, man, that was a lot, but sometimes we just get magic. You know how it goes. Every time, we have Mallory Kuhn on, it happens too. I see you, Mallory. Again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. You can find this on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Again, thanks, Dave, for helping us get the audio on Spotify and RSS.com. If you want to email me at scholarsofuma, that's UMA @gmail.com. I can pass any messages, comments, things like that, any questions for Chloe. Again, everything we'll put in the description for her to find her book or to get to her socials. Make sure you guys check us out next time, and especially for Chloe's second one with us. It's going to be either early, it's going to be either in January or February, for our February She Wrote. Chloe, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope you have a great rest of your Sunday, because you're ahead of me, right? And
Yes.
hopefully I will talk to you soon. Actually, obviously I'll talk to you soon on Twitter, and I'll send these links for you, and then we can both share them, and we'll help you have a really good opening week. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. Feel free to come by and talk fantasy or sci-fi anytime with us. Okay?
Okay. Bye.
Excellent. Have a good day. Bye.